This was a flourishing time in the ecosystem, with little to no disturbance from humans. Redwood forests have a large diversity of animal life, including bears, fishers, pine martens, and colorful songbirds called warblers. Redwoods are among the most incredible living things in the world. Their forests have stood on this earth for millennia, since long before humans evolved. In 1923, the last grizzly bear in California was killed. The grizzly bear plays a key role in this ecosystem, changing how nutrients are recycled through the system, swatting salmon from the rivers and spreading nutrients onto the forest floor through their excrement. We worry about saving the grizzly bear, says the insect ecologist Scott Hoffman Black, but where is the grizzly without the bee that pollinates the berries it eats, or the flies that sustain baby salmon? Where, for that matter, are we? Within 20 years of the industries being established, the supposed unlimited supply of timber was severely depleted, eliminating many species unique to the undisturbed ancient coastal redwood ecosystem. Records of fire history in the area go back about 1,000 years. You can look at the tree rings of the trees that have been living for that long and map out a timeline when these fires occurred. Prior to humans arriving in the area, all fires were ignited by lightning. Since these kinds of storms typically happen in the rainy season and the landscape can be relatively saturated, fires were often limited in their extent and severity. It's thought that native people of the area, the Yupi tribe of the Awaswas Nation, ancestors of the Amalutsan tribal band, used fire to maintain grasslands, but also within the forest as a way to encourage the growth of particular species. Fire frequency decreased quite a bit once native people were forcibly removed off the landscape. Massive amounts of carbon is released during lime kiln operations. During this period of heavy logging, species composition and dominance shifted to favor sun-loving species as new areas of forest were open to direct sunlight. Chaparral expanded in that time and into some areas that were previously forested. There's still dead manzanita in the understory of the forest left over from that time. Since manzanita doesn't grow in the forest, you can tell that this must have been a different habitat not too long ago. Tan oak is one of the species being hit the hardest by a pathogen called sudden oak death. This pathogen, called Phytophthora ramorum, is related to the same organism that caused the Irish potato famine. It was introduced to a nursery in Scotts Valley in the late 90s. And since then, it's spread all around this area and does exactly what its sudden oak death name says. The tree can look healthy one year, and the next year it'll be dead. This particular organism spreads its spores through water, and we've noticed higher levels of mortality after rainy winters recently. Fires are intentionally set by ranchers and loggers to burn excess wood and to promote growth of forage for cattle. These fires often go out of control and burn large areas of the nearby forest. After recovering from all that intensive logging, redwoods resprouted, and you can see clusters of redwoods around redwood stumps, where the stump and root sprouts grew up and are now mature canopy trees. There's a whole ecosystem in the canopy of a redwood forest. In this canopy ecosystem, there are many different species of lichen, and in certain parts, more in Northern California, you can even find a mammal like the red tree vole. Now we live in a culture of fire suppression. Since we've built a lot of our houses and buildings in these natural habitats that can burn or have burned more frequently in the past, we are now suppressing those fires, and this allows certain species that may have been kept at lower population levels, like Douglas fir, to become more dominant. The marbled murrelet is a small endangered seabird. It wasn't until the 1970s when people finally confirmed where this seabird actually nests, and it turns out it can nest up to 20 or so miles inland away from the ocean, up in an old-growth coniferous tree, either a redwood or a Douglas fir. They make a little nest out of moss on a really thick branch high up in the canopy. And every day the parent goes back to the ocean to catch fish and then flies all the way back inland to feed their chick. And then finally, when it's time for the chick to leave the nest, they'll just take off around sunset and fly away towards the ocean around 20 miles away. Which makes you wonder if that's part of the reason they picked such a tall tree. There must be some predator protection happening there, but I wonder if you can see the ocean from the tops of those trees, and that's one way they actually know where they're going. Atmospheric CO2 levels have reached 411 parts per million. Dead manzanita skeletons show that it used to be chaparral in certain parts of the present-day forest. An increase in fire frequency has promoted fire-adapted species and eliminated fire-sensitive species. The increased CO2 content and increase in temperature majorly impacts all climates. In the Santa Cruz redwood ecosystem, the temperature increases so dramatically and quickly that many species go extinct locally. Species that have the ability to physically move or move fast enough travel north into higher elevations to escape the hot temperatures. An interesting study that the Santa Cruz Puma Project did was looking at how fear actually influences the structure of the forest. Deer eat lots of plants, but really like to eat oak tree seedlings and twigs. If there are a lot of puma in the area, or if the deer are in a particular area where they might feel vulnerable and don't have an escape route, deer might avoid those spots. This can lead to higher reproductive and survival rates for the oaks in those areas. But if the deer are not worried about the mountain lions, or if mountain lions are simply not present in that zone, there will most likely be less oak seedling establishment. So you can see how that might influence the future of the forest. Humans continue life as usual. Nothing is done to curb emissions. An increase in greenhouse gases has caused a cascade effect, continuously trapping additional heat and raising Earth's average temperature even further. Fire frequency increases due to more ignitable material and forests broken dead trees. Arid grasslands and shrublands now replace the forest. Santa Cruz has heated up and suffers water deficiency. Trophic cascade is the concept that the more interaction is lost, the more disordered the ecosystem becomes. Cold and wet conditions have become less and less frequent. CO2 concentration rapidly rises to 940 parts per million, raising global temperature by 11 degrees Fahrenheit. In this hotter and drier world, there's been an increase in temperatures and a decrease in coastal fog. Redwood trees have disappeared from the Santa Cruz ecosystem. The last redwood forests are restricted to Humboldt County where conditions remain viable for redwood tree growth. A global revolution occurred where humans band together to radically reduce emissions and protect the environment, curbing emissions by 2025. The demand for energy worldwide continued and grew, which was met with a large portion of fossil fuels, causing the atmospheric carbon dioxide limit to exceed 900